less history and more mystery. I've always been curious and I've always been a student, and I have an insatiable desire to learn and to question. Um, and so, one of the questions that I have and I've had for a long time relates to the topic of history. And I study history. It's one of my favorite things to study. I consume hundreds of books a year related to history. Anything I can get my hands upon, or actually primarily audiobooks, anything I can listen to. Um, and I go as deep as I can go and learn as much as I can. And it's really fascinating. So the question that I've asked, and I suggest you ask to it, is history. What does it even mean? Well, the word history that we use in the English language, it derives from the Greek historia, and it's a query. It's questions and seeking to understand the answers to questions, and then recording uh, what we know about those things. Within the history is the story. And so when I ask, what is history? Well, it's his story. So that led me to the next question. Well, who is he? We have this saying that history is written by the victors, right? So the history that we are taught are purveyed by those who are in control of the society. We now live in an information age in terms of the rapid access to all kinds of information, and not all information is good information. So we have to vet more than ever. We also live in a time when there's less and less trust among the authorities or the perceived authorities. Um, and a lot more people are questioning now who has my best interest in mind. And so instead of history, what about mystery? How can we define mystery? Mystery is the unknown, that which cannot be explained or cannot be defined. But there's also a story. So his story or my story. And I prefer the my story, the mystery. And each of us has the opportunity to write our own stories. And so my story is the mystery. And the thing about the mystery, it's unknown. Well, the hardest thing to know is to know ourselves. What about her story? Right? What about her story instead of history? So, what does the woman have to say? The woman has been around from the very beginning. In fact, before the man, right? The woman gives birth to the man. So, why are we not taught her story? And why are we not taught to create our own stories? Instead, we are taught his story. Well, who is he? I don't know who he is, but he is not looking after my best interests. And there's a lot of things we know now, like an easy one, not to go too deep down, because there's, let's just say that I came to the realization that almost everything that I learned and that I thought I knew was wrong, either intentionally or unintentionally. A lot of it is just stories that are passed on generationally. And, so we think we know because we were raised into these stories. And so we have no question. We have no thought about questioning the stories, right? But an easy one to look at is like Columbus discovered America. Now, if you're of a certain age, in US we used to have Columbus Day. When I was in elementary school in the 1970s, we celebrated Columbus Day. It was in October every year. And then around 1980 or so, most of the states around the nation, and eventually became national, most of the states stopped celebrating Columbus Day, at least as an official holiday, and replaced it with Martin Luther King Day. So today we have Martin Luther King Day, which is a national holiday. Columbus Day is still exists, but it's not a national holiday. It's not a bank holiday. But we know that that's a very clear example of an out and out lie. Like it did not happen. Columbus did not discover America, right? He invaded Hispaniola, a modern day Dominican Republic. He invaded the Americas, but he didn't discover America, right? And then as we, and so history taught for many, many years, for generations, that this Columbus was a hero, right? And to honor these heroes, we come to find that he was a psychopathic mass murderer. And again, that was in line with the times. So I'm not a revisionist. I don't believe in going back, and we can't go back in time, but we can look and we can gain insight based on new information. That is progress. So the whole idea about history is something that really ought to be critically analyzed, and not assumed that just because we have been taught certain things, just because we have a habit of repeating certain things, that doesn't in and of itself define it as being true. And there's many, many examples of this. George Washington, right? You know, famous historical figures. And the more we study and the more we dig in, the more we learn that these individuals, they're not necessarily the heroes that we were programmed to believe. And again, if I lived 200 years ago, you know, I would have been a person of those times. And I probably would have done things in those times that by today's standard would be considered, unacceptable. And so we can't really filter the past through the vision of the present, uh, because bad people do good things and good people do bad things, and all of us have light and darkness within us. There is a dualistic nature. Life and death live side by side. uh, Many famous people, by any reasonable standard of ethics and morals, were horrible as human beings, and yet the legacy that they left, well, we benefit from that. So again, oftentimes there are horrible people, but they are instruments of change, like the robber barons of the turn of the from 19th to 20th century, the Vanderbilts and the J.P. Morgans, and there was individuals that created the commerce. Obviously, the Rockefellers. Uh, so over time, we can look back and evaluate and realize that these great individuals of society, well, maybe they weren't actually great people, but the legacy that they left behind did great for the humanity to benefit from. But we have to, the point being is we have to question history, and we have to not be so naive to just accept everything that we're taught from the textbook. Who owns the textbook? Who publishes the textbook? What is their agenda? What is their purpose? We don't usually know those things. So we have to be very careful with what we accept as truth. History, in essence, ought to be truth, but it is not truth. It is stories, and it's his stories. And there is the opportunity to create new stories. I want to hear her stories, and I want to tell my story, and that's the mystery. So, for all of you who are watching this and have stuck it out up to this point, consider creating your own story and manifesting your own story so that when your time is past, your mystery will be part of history or herstory. It's just some food for thought. It's a super, deep topic when we get into it. And that's why I'm so fascinated by history, because we can look at any period of time or any government or any kingdom or empire, and we can really analyze and dig out the stories. And it's there's more than we can ever learn, right, in a lifetime. But it's quite fascinating to me. I'll leave another example. Nobel, the Nobel Prize, right? The Nobel Prize is considered the most prestigious award that someone can win in terms of a meritocratic recognition. Um, that's also very controversial. Genocidal killers have won Nobel Peace Prizes. But Nobel, Albert Nobel, the way he made his living is through dynamite. He was selling dynamite in one of the first modern wars was the Boer Wars in modern day South Africa. And the Boers essentially the Europeans invaded that land. They had superior technology, superior ammunition. And so essentially the dynamite was used to create exploding ballistic, firearms. And small groups, small armies were able to exterminate, masses of people that had primitive weapons by comparison. If you have a spear and there's 100 of you and there's three of us and we have, machine guns, well, we're going to be able to spray, right, and wipe out the entire tribe. And so the point is that Nobel, the man, he created mass genocides. He contributed to, massive destruction and death of indigenous people. Yet, upon his deathbed, he wanted to whitewash his history, and so he left this endowment for the Nobel Peace Prize. And so, as we are taught, Nobel, that's like a prestigious, honorable award, and yet it was named after a genocidal mass murderer. So that's the challenge of history, is to understand that history is not my story and it's not your story, it's his story. So, food for thought.